What is going on, everybody? Welcome to a midweek collaboration with my main man, Sterling Bennett, talking some 49ers news as we approach the draft at the end of April. Not a ton going on, but there's some things we can talk about that have been pretty interesting little tidbits that have come out since I think the last time me and you did something. So, how is everything going in 49er access land?
It's going good. We had the week off. My wife flew to Japan, a 22-hour round trip
Thanks.
to Asia. It was a long plane ride. A lot of I have to go to the bathroom. Can you please excuse me on the plane? But other than that, Japan was incredible. The people are beautiful. It's my first time being out of the States, so it was a new experience, sometimes hectic and chaotic. However, I would do it again in the heartbeat. Kyoto is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've been to a handful of states inside the United States, but Japan is awesome. If you ever get a chance to go, go. That said, I came back to a lot of Niner fans being angry, which surprised me, but unfortunately didn't shock me because seemingly we're always angry at something nowadays.
Yeah, let's get into it. So, the big thing, really, to me, that's been a big point of contention, and I've kind of flip flopped on it depending on whose tweet I read. I feel one way, and then I read someone's tweet, and I'm like, wait, yeah, maybe I should, I should feel like that. Is the so-called frugal approach to free agency that we've had this offseason. And depending on who you talk to, and who you listen to on social media, some people aren't buying the whole, well, we have big contracts coming up, so we had to clear the books and dead cap and all this, that, and the other. And we've had some contracts in the last couple of years that, haven't worked out for us. And so the Niners are kind of clearing the deck for the Brock Purdy thing. And then on some people, they don't want to hear any of that. And where they come down on it is that the 49ers are being cheap. The Niners have a lot of needs to fill. They don't think they could fill them all through the draft. And so people are pretty pissed off about it. I'm kind of in the middle. I see both sides of the argument. I don't know how you feel. I'm going to ask you, but like, there's part of me that is like, um, we definitely need to get younger and we need to get fresh. We need to get guys that are less injured and cost less, which is all great. But the onus that puts on drafting and how hard it is to draft and how the Niners haven't had the best track record in hitting on those drafts, especially on picks that they really needed to have go right on them, is kind of where I think a lot of fans are at. So, what's your thought about this whole like, oh, we're getting cheap, but it's because we have a big contract coming up?
I think yesterday, I think it was Mike Garafolo tried to spin the idea that the Niners had to cut a lot of players, Leonard Floyd, Malik Collins, not bringing back Javarius Ward or Talanoa Hufanga, uh, as the reason, or claiming Brock Purdy's contract was the reason for them being a little cheap, if that's the word you want to use in free agency. And well, yes, you can maybe see with the selling point on that when it comes to you have a big contract you have to pay. You're not really sure what that number may be, but after hearing San Francisco wants to win that contract and they feel burnt by previous contracts they've handed out and they're going to be a little more frugal, they are going to penny pinch. Um, I have a hard time buying into the fact that Brock Purdy is the sole reason as to why they're cutting all these players. Like that to me is complete BS. They have $30 million in cap space, and I get it. It wasn't just for this year. But I've seen a lot of questions about like, what is San Francisco doing? It doesn't make sense to me. And I think two things can be true at the same time. Where one, you can be frustrated and upset that like I still to this day don't understand the reasoning behind releasing Leonard Floyd when you weren't signing Joey Bosa and you didn't replace him in free agency. That's confusing to me. That's okay to be upset about. Again, I don't know why they did that. They, as an organization, gutted their floor, which I get you want to get younger. Thumbs up. I'm all for that. I get trading away Deebo Samuel, not bringing back Greenlaw and Ufunga and Travarius Ward. I get not wanting to spend big money on guys that are nearing the age of 30 or of injury history. All of that makes sense to me. However, they didn't have to cut Floyd at all. They didn't have to cut Malik Collins. where we're sitting here 22 days before the NFL draft, sitting here like they don't have a defensive line whatsoever. Where I think if you walked into the draft with Collins and Floyd, albeit those players aren't great, they're kind of baseline players you like enough to keep around. They're veteran guys on one more year of their contract. I'd feel a heck of a lot better with those guys on the roster, knowing the upside really isn't there, but at least you have a floor. And that's where I'm kind of confused. That's where my biggest complaint is of like, look, I get it. Get cheaper, get younger. I'm all for that. You got to pay Brock Purdy. Awesome. You'll get healthier, if you will. But there's still some moves they made where I'm like, that doesn't really make sense. Like, you cut Tabor Pepper. That was more of a Brant Boyer thing of like, I want my long snapper, but it's like, so whatever. But it's like, why are you making these random fringe moves? Why'd you cut Juszczyk, then bring him back? Like, you can maybe rationalize that for money reasons, but it's like, it didn't seem to be a smart move, in my opinion. You took a dead cap hit for no reason at the end of the day. Why? So I get the frustration, but I am eagerly optimistic. However, I am also sitting back like this could really backfire in a big way in the next 30 days or so.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is that they're putting so much pressure on themselves to hit the draft.
Yeah.
Like they have to essentially hit, at least for me, if they got 11 picks, they got to hit at least 6.
Yep.
Just to make sense of it. You're going to need an edge. You're going to need a defensive tackle. You're going to need a linebacker. You're going to need a safety. You're going to need at least let people think that you're being serious. You might want to address something on the offensive line. I think everybody who saw the Leonard Floyd move, all of us thought, oh, we're bringing in Joey Bosa. And a problem we have, though, I'll say this, is we have a lot of people on social media who claim to be sources who tend to put out stuff that pretty much says things are a done deal. And if you question them on it, they'll be like, but I have a source. And I'm like, okay, that's great and everything. And then when the move backfires and it doesn't happen, they're getting pissed off just like everybody else. But it's like, if you had a source, you knew that was coming. So why are you pissed? So exactly. I don't know, man. Like I'm really just, I don't know how to feel. Part of me likes that they're going young and cleaning up cap space. One thing John Lynch did say is he said that they think that they're going to be a top, I think it was John Lynch. They'll still be a top 5, cap spender by the end of it all in the off season. So maybe the Niners have some eyes on some players that might be cut or people that are going to be free agents as we get closer to training camp. I don't know if you've heard that, and what do you think about that?
I mean, they have 11 picks. They swung a draft day trade for Trent Williams a couple years ago. Maybe they have a big name in mind they like. Off the top of my head, nobody really comes to mind. I don't think they're going to trade for Trey Hendrickson, although it'd be awesome. They got to pay him big money. I think a lot of what John Lynch is alluding to is like, we're going to pay Brock Purdy big money. We just dished out like 5 big bonuses to Bosa and Ayuk and George Odom and other guys on the roster. They're probably going to redo George Kittle's deal and probably fix the way his money's worked out. They may redo Fred Warner. I don't know, but I just think when you talk about gutting your roster, and gutting is a harsh word to use, really. And it's hard for fans to sit back and go like, what are they doing when they don't really see the vision? And sometimes teams have visions and all of a sudden things get muddy and murky and it doesn't work out. And I think it's okay for fans to question not what the plan is, but question, can that plan actually be successful? And that's where I'm at. Because like you said, you agree with cutting some older players, getting healthier. Like, I'm 1000% okay taking a 5th round pick for Deebo Samuel. I'm okay with that, 100%. However, I do question, you don't have, and you kind of said this of like, you have to get a defensive lineman and an edge rusher. No, you got to get 2 edge rushers. You got to get 2 defensive linemen.
And that's funny that you say that, because I've done some mock drafts just for my own
Right.
amusement, right? I caught part of yours the other day, and you went in some directions that I didn't think, like, I didn't agree with, but, you're my dude, so, like, I was willing to give you the benefit of
Oh,
the
come
doubt.
on, lay it on me, Aaron. Lay it on me.
No, we're gonna get to that. I'm gonna leave that at the end. But, uh, there is just like, when I was doing some mocks, I was like, "Yeah, we need at least 2 edge rushers." Because now, I mean, my thought was they were gonna keep Floyd, keep Yetur Gross-Matos, and then bring in, a rookie. And a rookie would essentially, if he turns out to be something, be the starter. And then what happens is guys actually go into the spot in the roster where they should be, a
Right.
depth guy. They're not a starter. When people play out of position and you force people to play minutes, like in like, I don't know, Warrior fans might know, like somebody who's in the starting lineup that is really better as a sixth man, right? I feel like with the way that the roster was constructed just in the beginning of March, I didn't realize that they were good. Like you said, they like, man, they gutted their defensive line. And you
Yep.
look at their defensive line now, and they got guys like Sam O on the defensive line,
Who you
and
like as
who I
your fourth
like
guy.
as like a fourth pass rusher. I
Exactly.
want him to be the absolute, like, okay, we're gonna go with a NASCAR package. Maybe we'll bring him in because he's a pure pass rush guy.
Be the
But
RDT. Be the
now you're
RDT.
right, like that kind of like all these mid guys, but they play a role. And then you have that unquestioned starter at the top of the depth chart. Now they're like, oh my god, like that's the part, and like I said, I keep going back and forth because part of me wants to be like, hey, John and Kyle are going to get this right, but
Yep.
then like Bobo in the comments, he pretty much said like, I was excited when they first got here, but after 10 years of heartbreaking losses, I'm okay with the regime change. Like some people are just like, I don't want to reboot. I don't want to start over again. They've been here long enough. They haven't produced. So, goodbye. So like, I get that kind of thing. Uh, I'm not as like extreme when it comes to that, because if you're going to do that, you better have someone who's going to come in here and win a championship like pronto. Then, because if that's the case, then you just keep who you have. But, man, they really are painting themselves into a corner. To me, I think they're four just the way I'm thinking, their first 4 draft picks are probably gonna be defensive line, right? Like,
It has to be.
where
Like,
else could you go?
and like, it's one of those things where we can buy into the idea of like great, getting younger, cheaper. They're going to build through the draft, 11 draft picks. I think it's tied for the most in this year's draft. So like they're like the building blocks are on the table of like you can do this. And if you trade back at 11 and go back to like 19 or 18, who knows, like you can get more day 2 draft picks and you can fill out the roster. And you traded Jordan Mason away, you got a draft pick. Like there are moves you go, that makes sense. They're building towards having an influx of young talent. However, at the exact same position in which they need defensive tackle and edge rusher, it's been Drake Jackson, who I get the injury. That's nobody's fault. That just happens. He's never going to play again, at least for
Nope.
this team. And that's a second round bust. And even when he came out, there was worries about his body. Of he was playing, stand-up linebacker for USC. They had him in a position. Who was he? How was he? And athletic freak. And at that time, you could take a risk like that. But now down the road, it backfires. You drafted Javon Kinlaw. Kalia Davis can't stay healthy. You went and got Hargrave, and that wasn't a draft pick, but it's like you're in a place where yes, we can see the vision of like, oh, Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, Broaden from Texas, Alfred Collins, all these players. You're like, bring those guys in. Jordan Birch, Sumatek, all these players you like. But then it's like, yeah, but you haven't been able to add anybody worth a damn in the draft at the exact same positions in which you now need. Now, I get it. This class is deeper at defensive tackle. The odds you hit later is higher than previous years, but it's like in Bobo's case and many other people's case, it's like I see the vision, but I really question if you're actually able to make it come to fruition for us. Because if you don't, it's a big risk. Like you said, Aaron, it's like you can see the plan they're putting in place, but it's like if you flub this up, at some point, whether it's this year or next year, somebody's head has to inevitably roll. And I don't want it to be Kyle or John. I like both of them. don't forget they built the current roster in which we have, in which they went to 2 Super Bowls in. So there was a reason to believe they can do this thing. I think they can. However, in recent years, it's like, well, 2024, that draft class is a big outlier compared to 2021 and 2022 and 2023. And it's like, holy hell, you had one amazing draft class that's kind of saved you. Because if they drafted bad last year, um, there's no hope for this team. So you're kind of banking on last year being what happens again this year, which could happen, but it's a lot of pressure on John Lynch and that scouting department to get things right. If they don't, someone's got to go.
Remember, like teams like the Patriots and the Steelers, good over a long period of time, same coaches, same everything. The difference between us and the Patriots have won those Super Bowls, right? So if they decide to say, I'm not paying Ty Law, I'm not paying this person, and they go and they draft their replacement, and for the most part, that worked over a long period of time. The Niners are trying to do that, but without the cachet of winning those championships. So people have a lot less time or a lot less belief or a lot less faith that it can work. You can essentially gut a roster every couple of years and bring in fresh draft picks. And then when those guys are about to get paid, you do the same thing, so on and so forth. You have your core that you pay. There's guys that you're going to pay. You're going to pay Brock. You're going to pay Kittle. You're going to pay Bosa, things like that. But there's going to be a lot of players outside of that where you have to make sure that you draft every single year and just keep that like it's almost like a what do you call a conveyor belt at a factory. You just keep it moving. And they haven't had, like you said, the most success doing that. And then, like I said, the cachet is not built up. You can have that cachet in the 80s with letting a guy like Dwight Clark move on because you drafted Jerry Rice and you already had 2 Super Bowl victories. So people gave a guy like Bill Walsh a lot less grief because he had that kind of already he had that like cachet in his back pocket. They don't have that. So like everybody's like you and me, like, man, you can't give away talent unless you know for sure what you're bringing in is going to either be as good or better. So
right.
There's a lot of panic going on. Depending on that, like I said, there's some people out there who make content or are very well known that just are not being positive about this at all. They just, regardless of how you try to spin it at them, they're just like, nah, I don't believe this. I think they could have kept certain guys and still paid Brock Purdy. They don't get the trimming of the fat. But at the same time,
which I think is partially true though. Like you could have kept Leonard Floyd. You didn't have to gut your defensive line. You could have let Debo get traded and let Hufanga walk and Greenlaw walk and all that stuff, which is again is why it's more confusing because they did, and I'm sure we'll get into more of this, but like they flew to Texas to hopefully get Greenlaw back and make him change his mind. But he's 27, 28 years old coming off an Achilles injury. Like you can't preach getting younger and more durable and cheaper than want to pay Dre Greenlaw, whether for 1 year or 3 years, big money off an injury. Like that doesn't make sense to me. And I'm kind of happy they didn't re-sign him, although it stinks. We all love Dre Greenlaw, but it's like sometimes there seems to be some mixed messaging. Now, Leonard Floyd wasn't an incredible player, but he's a fine number 3 durable piece. Like, he doesn't miss games. And in years where you had Debo who missed time, and Ayuk missed the whole year basically, or at least 3/4 of the year, and Hargrave missed time, and Kalia Davis has missed time, and everybody else on your defense, Dre Greenlaw has missed time, Hufanga missed time. Like, why would you cut the one guy who's pretty cheap for one more year when you didn't have to? And he got signed an hour later.
Yeah. Can you accept the people that say, because I saw something in the comments, not exactly what they said, but like we went 6-11 last year. So like on the table should be everything. Like all ways to make the team better should be on the table. Some people still aren't buying that and they don't think you can get better by giving away talent. He even said it in the post game or the postseason presser, or might have been at the combine about we never like to give away good talent, this, that, and the other, but they did just that. And like how many of us, including myself, thought Joey Bosa was a done deal? I did. Yeah. And not only did they not they didn't come anywhere close to giving him what he wanted. to go to Buffalo. But then they cut a guy who we all thought was going to be replaced by Bosa, and now you have neither, and now you're actually weaker on defensive line. John Lynch says they have a plan and that we need to trust them. Man, I don't know, man. Like like I said, you really gotta smash the draft, man. You gotta come out of this draft with at least 6 starters.
Let
If you think
me
about it, at
let,
least.
let me ask you this. Let's say the defense of cutting was all the same thing. They didn't bring back certain free agents. Greenlaw's gone, Hufanga's gone, Ward's gone. All those guys are gone. Everything is the same. But you knew they were going to redo Kittle's deal. Warner's back. Bosa's back. They're going to have draft picks, whoever they are. But Christian McCaffrey is healthy for, let's say, 15 games, 12 games next year for the most of the season. You like Grundo enough. If Brandon Ayuk was fully healthy, would you have more faith?
Yes.
I think that's a big thing for me where I know things kind of seem doom and gloom, but like I think a lot of people could accept trading away Deebo Samuel. And I think overwhelmingly most people accept trading away Deebo Samuel. But I'd feel a heck of a lot more comfortable knowing that, and maybe heck of a lot is not a great term to use or a great phrase to use, but I feel more comfortable if Ayuk was completely healthy as a number one receiver, knowing Brock Purdy's back next year, compared to where I am now, where it's like, you may need to draft a guy in round 2 or round 3 to be a receiver. And I don't think they will or should, but if Jaden Higgins is there, like, you maybe. If Jalen Royals is there, maybe. But if Ayuk never got hurt, I think a lot of this, although it's going to be hard to swallow, I think it'd be easier to accept. Okay, well, we have our franchise quarterback, we have our number one receiver against man coverage, we have George Kittle, we have relatively healthy Christian McCaffrey. But instead, it's like Ayuk may never be the same again. McCaffrey may never be the same again. And you have the same offensive line and a gutted defense and no linebacker too, although I do like the Winters enough. It's like there's more questions now. I think had Ayuk not gotten hurt, I think at least somewhat, I'd be a little more okay with this.
Yeah. The injury to Brandon Ayuk last year really threw a wrench because it's something I keep forgetting. I keep thinking about like, oh, we're gonna have Christian McCaffrey back, Brock Purdy's gonna get paid, blah blah blah, and then you're like, oh wait, Deebo's not here, but
Who cares?
I could care less. And a lot of people are like, but he did so much for you. I'm like, yeah, but he had
Not
a
last year.
short shift. Yeah. I just think that going into this season with the question mark in the wide receiving core, that's why all these other like peripheral moves on the roster, man, like there's so many holes to fill now in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
And like it even asked Kyle, do we have to like change our expectations? And he's like, no, not change our expectations, but like essentially saying like, the roster is what it is. Like, but of course you got to change your expectations because you're going into a season now with a lot of starters that are going to be rookies on this defense. Rookies.
Which isn't always a bad thing. Like the Rams did it last year. Philadelphia, although had a better defense overall than San Francisco as coming into the year, did it the last couple seasons. They brought in 3 guys that have been a mainstay on their defense the last couple years. Like it's not out of the realm of possibility. Like go back to 2019. You had 2 safeties that nobody really bought into just yet, and Ward and Tart had great years for them. You had Sherman, but you had Emmanuel Mosley, a UDFA, as your cornerback number 2. You had a waiver claim K1 Williams as your nickelback, who was phenomenal for you that season. You had Nick Bosa, number 2 overall pick. You had Eric Armstead, who was nobody until that year, had a crazy year for you. You went and traded for Dee Ford. And then you had a rookie Dre Greenlaw honestly making 2 of the biggest plays of the year, both against Seattle. It's like, so, you can find belief, but I think going back to the whole Leonard Floyd thing, it's like, I think if they kept Leonard Floyd and kept Malik Collins, like you'd feel a lot better. And those are 2 moves they didn't have to make. And it's like, which is why, again, I'm like 85% in, but it's like, oh, well, I don't know.
I'm definitely down with the idea of scrapping the wide nine. Mr. Big, Mr. Big Tuna? Is it Mr. Big?
I think it's Tulane. Tulane.
Mr. Big Twain 49er says, I've been asking for the wide nine to be scrapped for about 3 or 4 years now. I just don't believe in it anymore. I think it's really suspect against the run.
And now Salva's
Yeah.
back and going to run it every time.
And now we're going to, because now the Niners, we're running it back. I don't know. Do you think this isn't a topic that I put up there? Do you think a lot of the moves that the Niners made on defense, they did knowing that they have Saleh back, and maybe they think they can offset some of the losses on defense with just a guy that's going to coach them up really well?
I think yes, I would agree with you. I believe that they are putting more, not to say pressure, but you bring Salah back. Nick Sorensen was Nick Sorensen, for lack of better words. I think they are going to rely on Kyle and Robert Saleh as their coaches to be a big reason as to why they win. And I think that's okay. Like, I think, although San Francisco is not going to have an underdog label on them, sometimes when you are, again, kind of projected to be the second team in the NFC West, okay, like, let's go surprise some people, which maybe that's not the best way to look at things. However, I do think that they are going to have this 2023 Rams mentality of like, we're younger, we're not as good, but we can be scrappy. And they have the ceiling to be really good. And I think that's should not be forgotten with this team. Like, they still have a great roster when it comes to top end talent. However, when you're probably going to have at least 2 to 3 starters on your defensive line be rookies or at least unproven players, that's concerning. Like, if Jordan Elliott is starting for you on the defensive line last year, like, throw me out the window. Like, I just can't do it. Whether it is Walter Nolan or Derek Harmon as you're picking the first round, or, and here's the thing is that we see so many mock drafts are like, they're going to go Armin Membu, tackle out of Missouri. They're going to go Josh Connerly, tackle out of Oregon. I'm like, if they go tackle in the first round, you can sell me on it. Oh, play right tackle. He'll play guard for 1 year. Then he'll replace Trent Williams. What are you doing on defense? And so I think, to your point, bringing in Saleh was more of like, look, we're not going to have the dogs that we had when you were here in 2019 and 2020, but we're going to believe that you can bring the best out of them as rookies this year.
I love your name, by the way, Fluffy Ninja. He said Philly used the wide nine for years with Buddy Ryan, and it was terrible at times. Not a fan of it. I just think that I feel like the wide nine, they coach these guys. They always say, like, stop the run game on the way to the quarterback. Like, I don't believe in that. Like, I don't know. It just feels like everybody's super undisciplined. Anytime we play a quarterback that has any mobility, they gouge us with the wide nine, because it's not. I feel like they're not as disciplined in the way with their rushes. Whereas you had Philly in the way that they were rushing Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Guys were staying where they needed to be, and they kind of kept them in this little cocoon, and they were able to get to them. Whereas the Niners, at least under Kasarik, I always felt like their initial rush up the field was great, but they didn't have a plan once they got back there. So, yeah, I'm okay with the wide nine going away. But like you said, now that the crew's back in the building and we got our guy Saleh back, I don't think it's going anywhere unless Saleh gets fired or this whole regime has a change. I guess we kind of touched on the Brandon Ayuk, but there was talk that he was going to be there was trade rumors for a while, and then April 1st was kind of the cutoff point. That if April 1st hit, that meant he was staying in San Francisco. It hit. He's staying in San Francisco, at least for this year. Was there a thought in your mind that he was going to go anywhere? Or did you have pretty much like me, where you kind of knew that was just a lot of hot garbage for clicks?
I mean, there's always a chance. I think San Francisco is opening to trading him. I think they were maybe not looking to, but you heard all offseason from Kawakami and Barros and others, Mike Silver, of like, they hated that contract. They hate the way he handled things. Then it's like, well, then why'd you sign it? like, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but like, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And it's like, if you want to play a stupid game and wait things out and do negotiations the way you do, you're going to give out bad contracts sometimes. And San Francisco has done that over and over again. And, they don't have anybody to blame but themselves. And I think they're using Ayuk as kind of the, we messed up, but it's your fault. And it's like, no, you messed up, so it's your fault kind of thing. And I maybe this is them trying to look in the mirror, but I don't know. Like, I just don't buy into the idea that signing a player for $30 million a year and then trading him one off season later is good business. It's a waste of money. You don't get the draft capital you'd ever get. And now he's injured, so there's even more context behind it. So I never thought he'd get moved. I didn't think they took it seriously. I know a lot of people were like, well, they're open to it. And that's right, they're open to it. But John Lynch told Jennifer Lee Chan at the combine when all this stuff started of like, oh, they're going to trade him. He told her, like, no, it's not that serious. And like, nobody took that as gospel, even though it was coming from John Lynch's mouth. I think Ayuk, if he gets healthy, which again, there's ACL, MCL, and other ligament damage, so it's really serious and more serious than a normal ACL. I think he can still be a good player, but I also wouldn't be shocked if next offseason, because they hate him so much, it seems like, he's gone. And to me, it's like, okay, at that point in time, do you draft a receiver this year and get ahead of it? But in the same breath, Juwan Jennings is also a free agent after this year. You signed Demarcus Robinson to a 2-year deal. I thought that was pretty interesting. Like, it's not just Ayuk that may be gone. Juwan could leave too, although I don't think he will. But it just seems like, not to say San Francisco is kind of flying by the seat of their pants, but at times it's like, I don't know if you guys really have a plan, because all the plans you guys have made, you're not kind of bitching about. And I don't understand that.
Yeah, this is definitely it's been an off season of questions, and I think this is the first time I could say that I don't look at next season's team as a team that I think is poised to win a Lombardi. I feel like the way they got to go about things next year is they got to kind of be a team who essentially people are not going to expect a lot out of. They have a fourth place schedule, and if guys can stay healthy, I feel like a 49ers team that gets into the playoffs as a wild card is probably the most realistic option, just based on all the changes that they've had, especially on defense. Uh, Going back to Robert Saleh, new special teams coordinator. Some of the moves I really think, we could be questioning a lot of stuff, but the one thing we can't question is the Niners put a lot of onus on special teams in free agency.
Yeah.
And with their new head special teams coach, the fact that, like you said, they brought in a 40-year-old long snapper, which to me is just like him pissing on the ground and being like, "This is my long snapper. I don't want Tabor Pepper." That's the only reason you can look at it. Like, what other reason other than I want my own long snapper?
He's just 40? Slapping his long snapper on the table, like, this is how big I am, brother. It's like, okay, yeah. You're not competing with anybody. Brian Schneider's gone, dude.
Yeah, it's not a what do they call it? It's not a high. It wasn't a very high bar to begin with. So
no,
yeah. Brock Purdy contract.
Well, first off, we talked a lot about how a lot of the moves that they have made in cutting players have been bad. What do you make of the signings they have done? Because overwhelmingly, I think had they not had this massive exodus, I think there's a lot of good signings in this to raise the floor of the roster.
I like Demarcus Robinson as a wide receiver. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of him as a receiver, but they brought in a really good blocking tight end,
Luke Farrell,
which is awesome. I thought them re-signing Juszczyk actually was a smart move.
Yeah.
Which
I wouldn't have cut him first, but yeah, I agree.
There's a lot of underlying, like they really went big on special teams. I mean, how many of the guys that we signed are actually going to be camp bodies, especially in the secondary?
It's like Richie Grant, Jason Pinnock.
Yeah, like look at who was the safety that a lot of people connected us to in free agency, and he ended up signing. He came in for a visit. I thought he was going to be our starter.
Oh, the guy from the Browns, or was it last year, Julian Blackmon?
It was the Browns. It was the guy from the Browns.
what was his name? Oh my goodness.
Juan
They
Thornhill.
signed. Yes, yes, that's who it was. Yes.
I was never under the impression they were going to sign him just based on how things were going this offseason, but he was
Yeah.
one guy that I was disappointed that they didn't sign because
Okay.
they don't have a free safety to speak of. And I know a lot of people are, saying, "Oh, look at Jair Brown and stuff."
Yeah.
A lot of people are clowning him because he looks like he's really slow at boxing, and they're like, "What does that have to do with footwork? You're still going to be slow as hell," and blah blah blah. So, yeah. With all that being said, like they let Hufanga go, but I wasn't really ever
Yeah.
convinced that Hufanga was anything more than a box safety.
Terrible in
That's
coverage.
another whole other position that I'm concerned with. Although they did sign the one guy from the
Really?
Falcons, yeah, free safety is something that really
Okay.
scares me. They didn't
Yeah, I
they bring
mean,
it. They brought the guy in from the Eagles. His last name is Grant or Gant.
oh, Richie Grant from Atlanta last year. Yeah. They also
Any thought
signed
about
Pinnock
him?
from the Giants. Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of the guys they signed are going to be special teamers, guys that I was shocked they retained George Odom. I figured he'd be a player they'd cut, but that's not going to happen now. It seems like. That said, it's hard to like, you're not going to go, wow, what an A+ move, but I think a lot of these B- moves they brought in, these C+ guys that aren't gonna start games but have starting experience. I think Jason Pinnock from the Giants, who like has a nose for the football, not a great player overall, but like he's a guy that gets takeaways for you. And I think if you want to play 3 safety sets, if you want to have this bigger slot cornerback, I think could make some sense. You want to have Mustafa be your free safety, if you will. Like it'll be interesting to see what transitions or what changes Sala makes positionally with the current players on the roster. And I think that we need to be open to that. Like, there's a real chance that Jair Brown plays quote unquote strong safety this year, and Mustafa plays free safety, albeit none of those guys are roaming free safeties, mind you. You wouldn't want Jair Brown playing single high. You want Mustafa doing that stuff. And even then, Mustafa isn't tremendous in coverage, but he's good enough. He can go downfield with a certain receiver. Um, and so like I know we've heard a lot of complaining about the negatives, the guys that are gone now, but like the guys that are here they brought in, kind of hard to debate if they're good moves or not. But I think a lot of people are just seeing a lot of players they're emotionally attached to, Debo and Drake Greenlaw and Ufunga, and are like, how could they let those guys go? And it's like, well, put your emotions aside for a second and realize that Ufunga
Yeah.
was pretty bad in coverage.
If you really look at the moves that they made, like if you really break it down and look at them just from just a baseline level, I don't miss really any of them other than Greenlaw. But even Greenlaw was a 50-50 proposition that he's
Right.
ever going to be a healthy player the rest of his career. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people's problem isn't who they let go; it's who they didn't bring in.
Sure.
Like there was such an exodus of damaged goods, but still goods, but there nothing has come through the pipelines to make you feel like, okay, at least in the linebacking, we have a middle of the road starter that's going to start with Fred Warner alongside him. No, they don't have that.
Devondre Campbell.
Devon, never in a million years ever
Bring him
again.
back.
Oh, he was so bad last year, bro.
Did you hear Kyle
Ah,
take a shot at him yesterday? It was so funny.
no, I
Kyle,
didn't. What did he
Kyle
say?
was like, "Yeah, we were pretty bad in the run game. Some guys got hurt, defensive tackles weren't there, and our backup linebacker really wasn't that good either." And I was like, "Oh my god!" Okay, Kyle.
Damn, that's awesome. I like that. Um, talking about Brock, a lot of talk, not a lot of action still. I said this. I hate to be a jerk and when some people post stuff because I know they do it for their sites and stuff, but I always say like, oh wow, no new news. It's the same news. Like we're looking to get something done. We're having good talks. No guarantee it gets done, but there's also, all the same things are said by John Lynch. They keep continuing to ask him the same question. Oh, I think you said it in the one of the last streams we had. Like the Niners are the only team that seem to have this issue with signing players. Josh Allen right after the season was signed to an extension. No announcement beforehand. No talk. No conversation. They just went and got it done. And then there's the Niners. Part part of me thinks that they really mean it and that they're going to try to get it done before off-season programs begin in May. But there's also a part of me that thinks that it's going to drag into late July. How are you feeling about it?
I think my mind has changed a lot because a lot of what we were hearing initially, like pre-combine, was like they're having good talks. The agent was at the combine. They sat down. They had a conversation, and things were kind of at least seeming more proactive than previous negotiations they've had, which was good. They were meeting in person with the agent, which primarily doesn't happen. Usually it's through phone calls and through faxes and through emails and stuff, or at least, through Zoom calls. So I felt like things were heading in the right direction. Then it felt like there was this massive kind of pause of like, nope, shelve it, do free agency first, do the draft, and then we'll get to Brock, which if you go back to the last couple of years and how they've done things, that has always kind of been the case of like we do the offseason in stages. And if you're on the team winning a new contract, we're gonna kind of ride things out and wait till you're here in, June and July and maybe even May for OTAs. Like they'll wait to talk to Brock and his agent in person. And that's when they like to do things. It's a dangerous game to play with a quarterback that you want to give big money to. And I don't think he'll hold out. I don't think Brock is that person. And I don't think San Francisco wants that. I think after like the big sticking point for me is that we keep hearing they want to win deals. They feel like they've lost so many. And when you lose so many things, you get desperate, right? If you're a big wrestling fan, when you lose so many times, you turn heel and you start to cheat, right? So I'm not saying San Francisco is going about things in this like villainous way, but like they're not going to be afraid to take some low blows, penny pinch, and hope to win a deal from a financial standpoint. And although yesterday wasn't like big news, I did find it funny how Kyle was very much the coach speak, but when Jed York talks, he always puts his foot in his mouth. And again, it may be nothing, but like when he said, yeah, Brock's a top 10 quarterback, especially with Kyle and the offense around him, I was like, oh, like that may mean nothing, but like that also feels like something that people that don't believe in somebody would say, or at least people that are like, well, he's top 12, but he isn't top 10. And because he has Kyle and Chris McCaffrey and George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk and Pearsall, he's better because of that. And so
it did sound like a shot at Brock. I will say that.
Right. And so it's like now how big of a shot, I have no idea. It could mean nothing, but it's like now you're hearing from Peter Schrager, he's not going to get as much as $55 million per year. Whereas 2 months ago, the projections were he'll get 58, he'll get 60. So I think he'll get a 4-year deal, probably around $210 million. He'll probably make around the Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff current deal. I do feel like San Francisco wants the ability to get out of any contract they do. They tried that with Deebo Samuel, and Torrey Dandy put his foot down and said no. They tried that with Ayuk, and they have 2 years to do so before things get pretty hairy. And he got hurt, which complicated one of those off seasons, that being this off season. Kittle's deal was like that. They could have got, they've redone that deal so many times. And so I feel like whatever deal they sign is going to be not team friendly when it comes to the actual numerical value, but the way it's structured, it will give them an out here or there because they like Brock a lot, but I also believe they believe in the coaching staff more than Brock Purdy himself.
It's a lot of the discussion actually going on in the comments with Mr. Big and everybody else is, he's a serviceable. He said it right here. He said sign him to a reasonable 3-year deal while I continue to look for the guy. Brock is a really good bridge quarterback. I'm like kind of all over on this. I kind of agree with that.
Interesting.
Brock has his limitations, right?
Sure.
But I also think he's the best quarterback Kyle and John have had since they've had this franchise or had this control of this franchise. I don't worry about quarterback with Brock Purdy. Any other time with any other guy, I was always like, and you said that he put his foot in his mouth, but one of the things Jed York says is if you have a really good team, but the quarterback is not up to snuff, it can really hold you back and it could be detrimental. So he takes a shot at him indirectly, but then he also kind of props him up a little bit, saying like, we have more faith in the quarterback position than we've ever had
Right.
since John and Kyle have been here. So it's kind of like two things. Two things usually can't occupy the same space at the same time, but in the Brock
Right.
Purdy argument, it can. Um, I have a lot more faith in Brock than a lot of people do. Um, a lot of people always look at the stature, they look at his size, his inability to play in some weather. But if you looked at Stafford during that weather game last year, he was having just as many issues as Brock Purdy was, and he's probably got bigger hands and
He
he's a
threw
bigger
3
guy.
interceptions that weren't caught.
Yeah. So I mean, there's
It's like,
that.
okay.
It's it's for quarterback unless they get the second coming of I don't know Tom Brady on this team. No one's ever going to be satisfied because you look around the league, Sterling, and you see Josh Allen, you see Patrick Mahomes, even though he's had a couple down years. I don't think he's the same Patrick Mahomes that he's been. I think he's been carried by his defense. And Lamar,
Whoa!
yeah, you don't
Last year,
believe that?
probably more so. I think Mahomes is a player that turns it on when he needs to, but kind of coasts. He feels like Kevin Durant during the Warriors years of like, I have to be just good enough, but then once the big games come, I'll turn it up. But I think this year they just couldn't turn it up anymore. Like the offense wasn't as good as it had been in previous years, and Philadelphia was just so damn good up front. They couldn't
Yeah,
run the football. Like that to me was the difference of like Mahomes is great still, but you know, he's a very timely player where it's like he's not going to beat you 45-10, but it'll be a 28-23, 28-25 and you're like, how did he
but you
do
look at
that?
all of his Super Bowl performances, and they haven't been that great.
Yeah, I would agree.
And
Every
I
game
know
he's
people are
played
going to
in,
look at,
he should have lost.
yeah, he's say what you want about Joe Montana, but anytime Montana was in a Super Bowl, Montana played his best football. He
Yeah.
just did every
Which
time.
Mahomes plays it with the final 4 minutes, not the
Yeah,
rest of the time, which is
Montana
why
like
he's so good.
Montana likes the Super Bowl to be over by the third quarter, whereas Mahomes likes to wait till the very end to rip your heart out. Joe
Right.
just wants to rip your heart out from the get go. So no, I don't. You're never like you said. You look at those guys and you're always going to compare him against Brock, and of course he's going to fall short. Um, I don't. I don't want to do this.
Do it.
You're a
Do it.
wrestling fan. You know that Kevin Nash made a point about smaller wrestlers, and he compared it to if you're watching, pornography. You have a guy who's really well off and a guy who's not really
Sure.
well off. Who are you going to watch? I was
Hey,
just like, what?
sometimes it's the motion in the ocean, baby. And
Right.
and sometimes I like the motion that Brock Purdy's playing within the ocean for my quarterback
Uh,
position. So that's how I'll put it.
that was one of the things he said about when you look at smaller wrestlers compared to guys that are bigger. It's like,
Sure.
and I think like people look at Brock as the same way. Like he's a good little quarterback, and we could tap him on his head, and uh, he's good, but he's never going to be of that echelon. But if you look at a lot of the guys in the NFL, none of them are of that echelon. The echelon's like 4 or 5 quarterbacks. Everybody else is running the same race the 49ers are running.
Am
I'm not
I
saying that, go ahead.
am I wrong to say that we all love Brock Purdy's ceiling, but we're all terrified of his floor? Like we haven't seen the floor yet, but we're terrified of it. Of what could that be? Like there's a reason why Brock Purdy was the last pick in the draft. And he got into a great system with a great team around him. And to his credit, he's a baller. He's a dog. He's scrappy. He's very accurate. He makes big plays. He uses his legs. He does so many things other good quarterbacks don't do. However, I do understand people are saying there's a ceiling to Brock that is really good. To Jed York's own words, top 10 quarterback. I wouldn't even push back on that. But the floor, we haven't seen yet.
I
And I
feel
think,
like is she being facetious or is she really serious?
well, I think they've been saying free Brock Purdy a lot in the comments as well. So yeah, hashtag free Brock Purdy up up earlier. So
Oh, jeez.
probably being a little facetious here.
Oh, Strawberry. Come on now. Ah, that's I don't even know how to think about that. Let's see here. He says I was open to Brock, but this past season proved things in the scouting report to be true. Yeah. Yeah.
But can we also agree this is the worst? Last year was the worst Niner roster probably since 2020.
Yeah. They also were
And,
really bad all around. It wasn't just Brock. If we're
right.
gonna go and we're gonna slam Brock and say he was the sole reason why the 49ers were pitiful last year, that's 100% not true. Was he less than what he has been?
Sure.
Absolutely. Especially in some big games, he kind of came up short at the
Yeah.
end. But the defense was pitiful last year. They couldn't
The
stop
offensive
the
line
run.
was bad. The running game was pretty bad
Yeah, like
without Jordan Mason,
everybody
Christian
sucked.
McCaffrey.
Hey,
Yeah.
listen, there's quarterbacks that get carried to championships because they have an an unreal defensive line and other things. And to be honest with you, as a 49ers fan who's been a fan a long time, I really don't care what it is uh at behind center if as long as the Super Bowl is won. I don't care if I
Sure.
have an average quarterback and we win a Super Bowl on defense. I don't care. I'm not of this thing where it's you know what measuring contest like, well, my quarterback's one of the greatest. Well, mine's one of the greatest. Don't care. At this point, after 30 some odd years, just win a Super Bowl. I don't care if Brock throws 10 touchdowns during the season and we rush the ball and Christian McCaffrey has like 40 rushing touchdowns. Doesn't
Well,
matter to me as long as they win.
take Philadelphia. Do you think they would have rather have lost with Carson Wentz, who won the MVP, or won with Nick Foles? Like, come on. Like,
Of course.
Philadelphia won last year with Jalen Hurts, who, I'm sorry, is not a top 10 quarterback. He's fine. At times he can be really good. But early last year in 2023 as well, he's bad. He's a bad quarterback. And like you've seen Jalen Hurts' ceiling really good near MVP. You've also seen his floor, interceptions, incomplete passes, bad throws, and you're like, wow, you can argue the same thing for Brock Purdy. Wow, ceiling super high. Where you're
To
like, woo,
me, he's more to me when I look at Jalen Hurts, he's a more athletic, a bigger and athletic version of Brock, even though they're around the same height. They kind of have
um,
they both have those limitations that get you to question whether they're the guy. Like they show you things that make you think that they can compensate for what they lack, but then you also see the other side of it where you're like, that's why people look at him and say he's not an MVP type quarterback in Jalen Hurts. Because
I would. The thing is, Jalen Hurts like doesn't have pocket presence to me, or it's really inconsistent. Where I think Brock has pretty good pocket presence.
Brock is really good in the pocket. He knows how to avoid taking the big hit unless his offensive line just completely, you know, you know, Jake Brendel, namely.
Can I look? The Niners are going to pay Brock Purdy. That's just kind of what we got to go. You know, we have to live with that. Like, and I don't hate it. I am open to seeing what Brock can do. I'm open to paying Brock Purdy. We've watched Brock Purdy have 2 really good years and 1 down year, in which was the worst roster this team has had.
And he's
in his
still playing
time.
and his numbers are still relatively well on a down year.
Yeah, I mean, people will point out 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and that's fine. He also missed 2 games, which can be maybe an issue for them as well. I also just think that the way Brock Purdy plays with the roster they had last year, and a lot of people would say that, well, how good is the roster going to be this year? And we don't know. Like that is a big kind of big hindrance of how much do you pay Brock Purdy knowing that you are going to have to pay him big money. And it's probably going to hinder how much you can pay other people down the road, and how bad this team may be when it comes to a roster standpoint, a personnel standpoint. But a lot of the issues they're going to have are going to be on defense, not offense. Like they're going to have Pearsall, who looked pretty good last year towards the end of the year. They're hopefully going to have a healthier Christian McCaffrey. They are going to bring back all 5, or at least mostly all 5 starting offensive linemen, which you hope Ben Bartch can be better than Aaron Banks. And they may draft somebody or two. Let's see. You're going to have All-Pro George Kittle. You're going to have Demarcus Robinson, who is a much better number 4 receiver than Chris Conley was last year for you. You're going to have a hopefully returning healthy Brandon Ayuk whenever that may happen. You're going to have Juwan Jennings again, and you're probably going to draft somebody else. So I think next year in 2025, it's going to be an offensive-led team. And they're going to be in shootouts, and I think Brock can win those shootouts. They're also going to have one of the best schedules in football for them. So it may be a mirage, if you want to call it that, but I do think there is a way where Brock Purdy reestablishes himself next year with how good the offense and how, I guess you could say, how much they're carrying over next year and hopefully getting back healthier.
Best thing about having a young team is there's no history. They're coming in clean slate, and they're going to come in and, they're going to learn on the job. A lot of them, them having the schedule that they have next year, and maybe they start out slow, and along the way, the Niners turn into one of those teams that are young that nobody wants to play. Kind of like what happened, like you said, with the Rams and how their defensive line, all of a sudden, when Jared Verse has become like, man, they're really good. That's what the Niners are hoping for. Again, though, we go back to the beginning topic, and it's just like, you really are putting yourself up against it with just the way that you decided to, really hamstring this roster. But I listen to what you just said, and like, I think the Niners in their mind are going through the same questions that the chat and us are going through with Brock. They keep weighing like, okay, we can't overpay this guy because we can't be hamstrung if things don't work out. But at the same time, he's the best option we have and that we've had, and we want to pay him for what he's done for us. So it's like this, like most deals are. And like, I think you said it, I think Jed York kind of exposed what the thought process is behind the scenes. That, yeah, he's good, but he's even better when he has a really good supporting cast. I'm in like the middle with it. I think Brock is really good, but I think, like Jalen Hurts, he's uplifted by having a really good supporting cast, and that even being the defense. Because early in that Super Bowl, I felt like Jalen Hurts was going to fall on his face. And then all of a sudden, the defense started playing out of this world, and I think it just did something for the offense, and they just came alive. Because early on that Super Bowl, when he threw that first pick, I'm like, oh, Kansas City's going to crush these guys. I was wrong.
Is it wrong that even at halftime I was like, oh crap, this game is not over? Like,
right. I felt the same way in the fourth quarter when they almost got that onside. I'm like, are they going to come all the way back? Is this going to be Atlanta, New England again? Yeah, I was the same.
Can I ask you this? Because I think throughout the offseason, it's been a lot of, the Niners don't have this. The Niners don't have that. The Niners didn't replace XYZ. The Niners didn't find a starter here or there. If I told you they were going to walk in 2025 with a near top 10 pick, right, and 10 other draft picks, despite the holes they have, and although aging, a still somewhat competitive and hopefully healthier Christian McCaffrey, Isaac Rendo, who, although has his own injury history, as the number 2 running back, they're going to have Pearsall, who's a first-round pick receiver, which you may not like that, but he is. An all-pro Hall of Fame, future Hall of Fame tight end, which he may end up passing T.O. in some stats in the Niner record book. You're going to have a Hall of Fame left tackle who has his own problems with injury history. You love your right guard. You love your first defensive end in Nick Bosa, arguably top 5 in football. You have the best linebacker in football. You have 2 tremendous cornerbacks. You love one of your safeties. Like, we talk about so much San Francisco doesn't have, and I get that. That's part of the game we all play, but it's like, we often forget that a lot of teams in football would love to have this roster and say, oh, there's so many building blocks we can have success with. And a lot of it hinges on what happens in 22 days at the draft. But can we admit this team has a really good core but still has to hit on the draft picks to make it worthwhile?
Luke Luna, you totally on board with what you just said. You got great core pieces that many teams would love to add young talent to. I think will be better than a lot of people think. I hope so. I'm this is the most I've always been more of a negative fan than I've been a positive fan, but the last couple seasons I kind of turned with Brock. I became a lot more positive. This offseason has me going back and forth.
Sure.
We won't know how good the 49ers are with the draft until probably mid-season. So we have even if we nail it in the draft, according to Kuiper, we're not going to know because, those draft experts can be wrong.
Especially Mel Kiper.
Especially Mel Kiper. How much longer you got?
I got you all day, brother. I have to go in like an hour, so we're good.
Okay. Let's talk. 49ers addressed it. Kicker. They're going to bring in a veteran kicker to compete with Jake Moody. My question is why just get rid of Jake Moody? But unfortunately, they don't run the organization like fans. Any thought on that? And do you think it's going to be a fair competition? Because part of me thinks it's not going to be.
I think it'll be fair. I think the Niners, I don't know who put it in the YouTube chat earlier, but it was like, you win 6-11, everything should be on the table.
Yep.
Kyle mentioned it yesterday during his press conference. Like, we were at a point where we were so loaded that kicker was kind of the only starting position that we kind of needed, which was true at the time. And they splurged and it kind of backfired in their face. And I think if they can go back, although I don't know who they draft there off the top of my head, I think Jake Moody has the physical tools it takes to be a good kicker. However, mentally, I'm not sure he's built for it. And I think the Niners, whether it is Nick Folk or somebody else, whoever it is they bring in, I think the Niners are going to have to be honest with themselves. And I think they have done that this offseason with wide receiver and the defense and linebacker and safety. They've started that process of being honest with themselves and admitting their mistakes. I'll give them credit. They brought in Trey Lance and they realized 2 years in, oh my God, what a mistake this was, and got what they could for him at the time. Now, it still wasn't a great move to draft him and trade up for him. However, they admitted their mistake. And
all of us, including myself and a lot of other fans, were so excited when they drafted him. He's proven, and it's not just with the 49ers. He's not an NFL quarterback. He's a
UFL quarterback now, right? Something like that.
Maybe.
I think the Battlehawks added them to like their potential signee list, and I was like, oh my God, the Saints wouldn't pick this guy up. What the heck? But besides the point.
Yeah, it's there was a lot of people that just didn't want to accept that when it happened too, and were just so mad at the 49ers for moving on that anything Brock Purdy's been able to do, they will not give him any credit. And it's with anything, eventually someone's going to fail. And so, the clock is right. What they say, twice a day, the clock isn't wrong, or whatever the saying is. So like even with Brock,
I think it's a broken clock is right twice a day.
Twice a day. So the people who hate on Brock, of course, they're going to be right. Sometimes he doesn't look the part, and maybe he's not quite what most teams would see as a potential starting quarterback. But Trey Lansing is what it was, and it's too bad. They could have used those draft picks a couple of years ago to rebolster a team who is going to be going through some cap hell in the next couple of seasons. But they did that to themselves. Brock saved a lot of people's jobs.
I think a lot of the Trey Lance trade stuff, I think a lot of that is what we're seeing of like admitting we made a mistake. Now, kicker is a more, I guess you can say, harder to admit you made a mistake and find a savior in Brock Purdy. Although luck out getting Brock. That said, I think they're going to be open to it. I think they want to test Jake Moody. This is a big thing here. This regime, per se, the special teams coach who drafted him ain't here anymore. There is no connection to him from Brant Boyer. He can bring him in and say, I don't like him. Brian Schneider famously, now infamously, said to the media, and I was right there front and center. Jake Moody had the perfect workout. Brian Schneider got fired and had one of the worst special teams units in a decade. Brant Boyer is now in here. He already fired Tabor Pepper. He's already brought in some guys he likes, Richie Grant, Pinnock, the linebacker, I'm forgetting his name.
You think they're giving him autonomy to make that decision? You think he could be the one who makes the decision whether he stays or goes?
I don't think Brant is like, I'm the one guy that you got to come to, brother, and I'm the one that, I don't know why I went Hulk Hogan there for a second, but,
brother.
but he's not going to walk in and be like, hey, we're going to fire Jake Moody. Like, he's not going to go, full Randy Savage for a second, how bad that impersonation was. But, it's like, I think there will be a discussion. And I think Brant Boyer is going to have a pretty loud voice in there. And he's going to say, look, John Kyle, I didn't like him when you drafted him. Hence why I didn't do it in New York. He's not good enough here. I don't think Jake has the mental fortitude to be a kicker. That's the reason why you see so many UDFAs excel, because they have the mental fortitude. Maybe don't have the big leg, but if they can make a 45-yarder consistently, they're going to be a kicker for a decade.
How many kicks did Robbie Gould make for the 49ers, big kicks? And he had
a lot of them.
He had a flesh and bone for a kicking leg. Like, there was nothing there anymore.
Exactly.
But most of us, if not all of us, thought anytime Robbie Gould came up to kick, he was going to win the game.
Good as gold.
Even a question.
Good as
gold. I mean, every time, like at any point last year, at least at the end, at one point last year, especially at the end of the season, I guaranteed that he wouldn't make kicks, Moody, and I was right. Like, he was so bad and so emotionally broken. I mean, you listen to him in the post-game press conference. I don't want anybody like that in my locker room if I'm a veteran player. I don't want you here. I don't want that weak-minded mentality. This is a National Football League, People are paid millions of dollars to perform and make plays, and you have essentially a job where you can come in for 2-3 hours during a 100-degree practice day during training camp and then go home and play golf while all the real players sit there and bust their ass just for you to come in and be weak-minded and miss kicks. Like, yeah, they need to go into this. Like, they better give him some say when it comes to this, because somebody made a good point. If you go based on a competition when there's no pressure, Moody's going to blow you away because he's got the better leg. But if they go through it and choose Moody again, I feel like the 49ers, that would be one of the worst moves to come off of last season. And I think it's going to happen too, and that's the sad part.
I think for Jake, I think Jim Harbaugh hit on this. It's about reestablishing confidence. And I don't really care about him hurting his ankle and how much that affected him. I'm sure it did, but he sucked his rookie season too. So, maybe he didn't suck, but he wasn't that good either. And so for Jake, you're kind of on a 2-year stint of like, I've been above average and then terrible. Like, it took getting your long snapper choked out by Deebo Samuel to make him make one field goal, which in retrospect, I wish you would have lost that game, would have gave us a higher draft pick.
Right.
And so it's like, I don't know who they're going to bring in. Maybe it's a UDFA. Maybe it's like a 10-year veteran guy. I have no idea. But I think the preseason, and I think for the first time in a long time, people are going to have their eyes glued to the goalposts in practice and training camp. And it's like, Jake has missed some in training camp when I've been there, but overwhelmingly, he's hitting some from like 68 yards. And you're like, oh my God. And I get it's a practice field compared to an NFL stadium, and they're going to be better there. But it's like, you have guys that are UDFAs bagging groceries at Vons or Safeway that come out there with soccer backgrounds, don't even have the correct cleats, and are booting kicks for 55 yards accurately, consistently. And for Jake, it's like, not to say he's a head case, but like you said, me and my father were texted on game day, and every time it was go for it on fourth down, go for it on fourth down, go for it on fourth down, simply because you didn't want to see Jake Moody trot out there because you knew it was going to go wide left or wide right. It was going to be a waste of a drive. And when you watched Matthew Wright, who doesn't have a leg whatsoever, make 40-yarders, and you saw Anders Carlson, who can make one from 65 yards, be somewhat competent, it was like, we took Jake in the third round for what? Those guys were in-season signings, and we're getting the job done to a certain extent. So they'll give him a chance. I hope Jake wins the job because I hope he can be the kicker he's supposed to be. That said, I don't think he can be, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of faith in him. But like you said, I feel like the 49ers are going to end up making him the kicker again next year. Oh, look who it is. It's my dude right there.
Wow.
Gray Area Sports. What up, my dude? What up, my dude?
That reminds me of the Grinch where he's like, what's up, my guys? That was terrible too, but I apologize.
Who was that supposed to be?
It's like the Grinch when he's...
I thought you were doing Andy Kaufman from Taxi. Thank you very much. Latka. He says he's at Legoland right now. Sweet. What was I going to say?
Do you have to have a kid to get in there? Because I wanted to go, but I think you have to have a kid with your policy, and I was so bummed out about that. I went to Chuck E. Cheese
when I was about 11.
Okay.
I would have really liked to go, like, now.
Just in the ball pit, like, get out of here.
I got caught trying to put the ball pit balls into the skee ball machine.
Nice.
And the mouse came up to me, and he was like, I was 11 years old. I was acting like I was 5. I went in the ball pit, the nastiest, most contaminated, germ-filled.
There's like diapers and spit, feces all over the place, and you're like, oh my God.
Other bodily fluids that we don't want to talk about. Yeah, that's gross.
Dude, I didn't know Chuck E. Cheese was Skid Row. Jesus.
Yeah, literally skid. What the heck? Where's the? Was it Luna? No. Where is that comment? He talked about
the plot.
He talked about Moody pre-injury wasn't that bad. He hit 2 record-setting kicks in the Super Bowl with all the pressure on the line. Yeah, see, that's the thing. There's the injury concern that maybe that was the real reason that he was bad last year. I don't know, man. I don't want him on this team. I want him gone. I don't care who the kicker is as long as it's not him. But like we've discussed, I think there's a pretty good chance he's coming back next year. So
when your kicker and your quarterback are the 2 most contentious positions on your roster, something bad's happening.
Yes.
Like it should be one or the other, and usually it's quarterback, not the field goal kicker too.
We can move it over to offensive line. That was another topic. Something that John said something about how he feels he has belief in his center. He has belief, I think, in his right tackle, he said, and in I forgot what other position. So the topic on my screen literally says offensive line still not priority. Like everything.
Should say offensive line WTF is what it should say.
Yeah. All this talk in the offseason, all these mock drafts. And it still comes around to what I've been saying personally and myself, just Aaron. 49ers, much like the Dolphins, because the Dolphins have the same issue because they kind of have a similar mindset of how they build their roster. They do not prioritize offensive line. They prioritize skill position players. And the 49ers have just made that more abundantly clear when you listen to John Lynch talk about it. And so I hate to say it, guys, but the offensive line next year ain't going to look a whole hell of a lot different than it did this past season. So get ready. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I think I would be much more concerned as to what Kyle Shanahan said compared to what John Lynch said because, okay, Colt McKivitz is starting our right tackle. I don't love that. I don't hate it. It's fine. I mean, he's a serviceable right tackle that isn't great against power, and he's a pretty good run blocker, but isn't a great pass protector, hence Mike McGlinchey 2.0. But at a pretty cheap contract where it's like, whatever. I don't love the idea of drafting a right tackle in the first round and hope they transition to left tackle in the future. I get it. Membu's a big one. Josh Connerly, Josh Simmons, although he has the patellar injury. Kelvin Banks can play guard, and I think Kelvin Banks makes a ton of sense for the Niners, albeit, again, I think they're going to go defense, so it kind of erases the idea of that. That said, I'd be much more concerned as to what the Niners, and mainly Kyle Shanahan, said yesterday, because they gutted their defensive line. They didn't gut the offensive line. Like, Aaron Banks got overpaid by the Packers, which in itself makes no sense for them from a personnel standpoint, but go on. Pay your left guard $72 million to be, at least for San Francisco last year, pretty bad. They like Trent, obviously. You like Dominic Pooney a lot. You like Colton McKivitz enough. And you're hoping you can get something from Ben Barch and Spencer Burford. I mean, I can honestly say losing Jalen Moore was probably a bigger loss than Aaron Banks was.
And he got overpaid too.
Right, but he's going to start at left tackle, a position that the Chiefs need. Whereas Aaron Banks, it's like, we didn't really need a left guard, but okay. But losing a swing tackle is a big deal for this team, especially knowing that McKivitz is not a great player, but an okay player, and Williams is probably going to miss some time next year.
Always.
Whether it's 3 or 5 games. You love Trent. He's a high-end Hall of Famer, but he's going to miss time. The ankle's a problem. And so this team is going to have to find a higher ceiling backup tackle. With that in mind, the Jake Brendel conversation seems to be what we're all kind of dancing around currently.
Yeah.
Because everybody hates Jake Brendel. Like, everybody has some sort of disdain for him. Not as a person, but as a player.
He's just a bad player. He's not a bad guy. And at least we don't.
Right.
Think he is. Right.
From all the interactions I've had with Jake Brendel, very soft-spoken and a kind person to the media, so I won't say anything more about that. But the quote from Kyle Shanahan was yesterday, and it was a long quote, but it was, and I have it in front of me. I thought Jake played well. When you study centers throughout the league and things like that, I think Jake's up there. When it comes to his pass protection, a lot of these guys get mismatched against head-up nose tackles and some of these defensive tackles they have to go against. I think Jake does protection as good as anyone in the league. I think he's always been a pretty good run player for us as well. I will concede the fact that Jake Brendel is an adequate run defender. That said, he constantly calls out the wrong protections. I think the bigger issue for me was that when he was kind of pressed or asked, like, okay, like, well, you signed Matt Hennessy last year. He's a backup center, but he started for the Falcons a couple of years ago and took over Alex Mack's job. Is he going to be in the competition? Kyle Shanahan openly was like, no, he'll be at competition at left guard instead. And it was like, how did you watch Jake Brendel, who, okay, does things you like. He's a fine player as a run blocker, but at least not open to a competition. That's my biggest issue. If Jake Brendel starts for you next year, I don't love it, but at least he won a competition with somebody.
Kyle seems to make decisions based on what he wants, not based on better play. Like, even like guys we've drafted in the secondary, and they end up bringing in a free agent, and the free agent gets to start over the rookie or the younger player who's played better because he's the guy that they brought in via free agency. And I feel like Kyle, like, it's not even a consideration. Like, to me, and like every other fan, it's like, let them duke it out in training camp, and then you make the decision based on that. No, Kyle doesn't do that. Kyle makes the decision up in his head, and the fact that he didn't, like, he dismissed that so quickly and was like, nah, he's going to start for us at guard. Like, it was not, whatever we think as fans, they don't care. He doesn't care. He's already made his decision before the players even step foot on the practice field, which I think is really weird. And why the 49ers offensive line, at least at some points, has been one of their biggest issues since they've been here. They lost 2 Super Bowls because they couldn't block Chris Jones. And yet they still can't find a way to get out of their own way when it comes to making decisions, when it comes to bettering their offensive line. So,
which is funny because they did that and the right guard was the issue. So they go and draft Dominic Pooney. They got a right guard. And I think losing Aaron Banks and getting a better left guard may help Jake Brendel be a better player. I think Aaron Banks was so bad last year for this team that a lot of the hate Brendel gets is because of Aaron Banks being bad. That said, Jake Brendel was like the 60th rated pass protecting center in football. And I'm sorry, when you have teams like the Rams who are going towards more of a power and stunt heavy defense, where in previous years they weren't doing that. When they have Jared Verse, they have Braden Fisk. They're gonna probably freaking get Kenneth Grant this year from Michigan in the late 20s. Like they're gonna have these dominating 6'5" defensive tackles that play with power, and then they're gonna have stunts. And Jake Brendel has had a problem with that mainly last year. So the only problem is that this center class isn't good. So I think you are gonna, and I think they should do this, find a guard to hopefully play at left guard that can maybe be a tackle for you or maybe be a right guard for you in the future. I have no idea. But I think that, when you have on your offensive line and you're walking into this year pre-draft, mind you, pretty big weakness in pass protection at center, a below average pass protecting right tackle in the Kivitz against power. You saw against Kansas City, Karlaftis just said, "Get the F out of my way." And it was like, oh, he's like on the sideline, got shoved so far up Brock Purdy's butt. Like, oh my God. And you don't know who left guard will be. And I like Ben Barch, but even then, he's hurt all the time. He was hurt in Jacksonville. He was hurt in San Francisco after playing like 3 games this year. He's got talent, but I think getting someone like Dylan Fairchild from Georgia, who I picked in my mock draft earlier this week, I think it's Jonas Savaiinaea from Arizona makes some sense at guard and tackle for this team on day 2. Like, if they're not going to improve center, you better improve your guard position because it can be a nightmare again for you. And the fastest way to a quarterback is in the middle. Center, guard. There's a reason why the Eagles were up Mahomes' butt in the Super Bowl.
What do they say?
Pressure from the interior.
The quickest point to a destination or from one point to another is a straight line.
Exactly.
It works for defensive tackle or defensive interior on the offensive line when your center can't block for worth a damn. I guess we'll wrap it up. We don't have to go into specifics, but I'm excited with the draft coming up.
Can't wait.
The Niners were bad enough last year to where the draft is actually going to be exciting for us. They pick in the top 15 picks. A lot of things could happen. They either stay put. You had in your mock draft them falling back to 19, picking up extra picks. I saw the beginning of your draft. I wasn't in complete unison with you, even though you're my dude. I got mad love for you, but you didn't really. I think it was wide receiver you went with at 19. Forgot exactly how you went about it, but it was like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I'm excited they have a lot of picks and they're going to pick early. What would be Sterling Bennett's perfect scenario for the 49ers at pick 11? Would it be trading back, staying put, taking in a defensive lineman? Like, if it was you were in the GM room, how would you go about it? Because I always find your way of looking at things interesting.
Yeah, I think, obviously it depends on who's there. Sometimes draft day surprises happen. Like if the Browns or Giants take Shedeur Sanders, I mean, someone you like is probably falling to you. I think Armin Membu at right tackle will be interesting. I think he fits this offense. That said, this team doesn't need a receiver in the first round. I think it's defense all the way. When you gut your entire defensive line, you have to go defense. I think San Francisco should be looking to using the edge rushing class and the tackle class in their favor. And by that, I mean trading back. there are clear tiers to this year's tackle and edge rushing class. You have Abdul Carter, who you love. You have Mike Green, who I think a lot of teams like, but there's some character concerns. Then in that group three, it's like as Rocco, then it's James Pierce, then it's other guys in that same vein. Then at tackle, you have Membu, who's probably the best one. And I can see San Francisco taking it. I don't think it fits a need now, but it will certainly help the offensive line at right tackle, then probably in the future left tackle once Trent retires. I don't know if that's what they feel like. Usually San Francisco wants to take the offseason by offseason approach where it's like, if Trent retires, now we're going to replace him kind of thing compared to getting ahead of things. So I had them trading back to 19, allowing the Buccaneers to go up and get Mike Green. I think they can go back and they could probably get another day 2 pick. This team has pressing needs to get starters. And I think getting more picks inside the top 100 is the way to go. And if you have one pick on day 1, you can still get your defensive tackle, I think, on that day, whether it is Derek Harmon. I love Walter Nolan. Not a big Kenneth Grant guy, but I really do think Harmon and Nolan make a lot of sense for them, whether it is at 11 or in the late teens. But if you get day 2 picks and you have 2 of them in the second round, you can kind of go crazy. You can have the high-end edge rusher you like that has high potential. Then you can go draft a high floor guy to kind of even things out for you. But I think as of where things stand currently, they have 4 picks inside the top 100. They have pick 100 in the third round, pick 75, and they have pick 53 and pick 19 or pick 11. So they're in a good position. I think getting as many picks as possible to increase your chances of finding some high-end starters makes the most sense, knowing you gutted your defense. So I would go Walter Nolan in the first round. I think you could really pitch me on going defensive line 3 consecutive times, and I wouldn't be mad. Just fill your defense with young studs and say, may the best man win. And you give Saleh this young, aggressive, high motor core of defensive linemen with Nick Bosa. Hard to disagree with that.
But you can teach them good. The great thing about young guys, they're coachable. You know what I mean? And they're like clay. You can really take, and that's one thing having Saleh back makes me excited, is to really coach up these guys from youth and just turn them into these just unbelievably young, fresh, healthy prospects. I'm like you. I'm going, if I'm the Niners, I feel like my first 4 picks are going to be edge and interior, edge and interior, interior edge. Like, I wouldn't be mad if the Niners spent 4 picks on the defensive line.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, they need it that bad.
I had them taking 3 guys in the first 3 picks. I had them going Walter Nolan, JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State at edge, and I had them taking Jordan Burch, who can play inside and outside to give them more versatility.
Nice.
I think that makes a lot of sense for them. Now we'll see what happens on draft day in the first round or whatnot. But, I think you get high-end draft picks and guys that Saleh can work with. The one thing about Robert Saleh, when he was in New York, if he had 9 defensive linemen, but he liked the guy in the first round inside that top 10 as an edge, he'd take him anyways. He'd say, we'll figure it out. Now,
you never can have enough.
They even traded for Hassan Reddick last year. He didn't play the first half of the season. They just wanted to have him on the team. Now, they were terrible last year for a variety of reasons, but it's like they were like, we got to get more, and they had already plenty on the roster.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome, dude. I'm looking forward to the draft. I know me and Andre are going to do. You got to be careful with doing stuff with the draft because YouTube will dink you. I already lost monetization, so who cares? But we'll be on, I guess, reacting to the first round. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to hopefully doing stuff with you on the reg, which is something I never thought would be possible because you've always been so busy. But I'm trying to fill out the weekly content during the season with people that they always say the best way to do things is do things with your friends or people that you like. And I feel like for the first time in all the years that I've been on YouTube, I finally have found like the group that I'm pretty cool with for a while. So it's going to be fun. I always have fun doing this stuff with you, and everybody else. So, for everybody in the chat, Thanks for joining us on 49ers Access and 49ers First Takes. I'm sure me and Sterling will be back together at some point in the future, maybe around the draft, maybe after, who knows. So everybody take care. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for chiming in with your presence. It was much appreciated. And we will catch you guys down the road. Peace.